All right. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in today to the Lessons in Leadership podcast. I'm excited to have a guest with me. Her name is Sayre Darling, and she is uh, absolutely fantastic. Wait, Sayre, we had a great conversation the other day, so I'm really excited to introduce you to my audience and tell them all about how amazing you are. So thank you and welcome for joining me today.
My pleasure.
So through our conversation the other day, we started talking a lot about conversation. And I think I said something to you like this. In today's world, so many people try to optimize for automation. And I said, no, right? We're still in a people business. We should be optimizing for conversation. So tell me about that because you immediately lit up when I said that. We had that instant connect moment, right? Where we were on the same page. Let's talk about conversation.
Well, thank you, Bill. I do love this subject. The difference between conversation and business communication is that a business communication is you ask me a question, I answer the question. You ask me a question, I answer the question. It's a bit like a tennis match where we volley information and exchange information on a topic. A conversation, on the other hand, really builds connection. I understand if I like you as a person, if I can trust you, if I want to share a joke with you or help you have a better day if you're having a tough time, kind of thing. And a lot of time in COVID, we spoke about leaders needing to be authentic, empathetic, etc. And I push back against that a bit because when you are busy being a specific characteristic, you're still not in conversation because you're thinking, oh, am I being empathetic? Did that sound authentic? And what people want to know is who you are. And that is a combination of your head and your heart coming together to reveal what your values are, what's important to you, what makes you tick, and helps you build a connection that enables you to build a new opportunity, to create a new job, to build a successful project. If you can only come together volleying information back and forth and say, wow, that was a great connection. She answered all of my questions. We had a wonderful connection. No, I successfully answered the questions that you knew to ask. If there is a connection, I can understand a bit more about what it is you're trying to find out with your questions, offer you some additional information and ask you some questions that brings more information into the conversation.
Yeah, I love that because that's your authentic self showing up, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I don't want to start out a relationship by feeling like I'm being interviewed by a journalist, right? I mean, I want to be able to have a conversation with you like I've known you forever, and we're sitting down and we're having a cup of coffee and we're just talking,
Mhm.
right?
That's
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
that's kind of how our first meet was, right? As soon as we started,
Yes.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
think about all the people that you talk to during a week, okay? And what are the ones you remember? The ones where you built a conversation and had a connection. There are many exchanges of business information, business communication that you have. And the following week, you go, yeah, I talked to somebody last week. I don't remember who it was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If you don't feel like you get done with that conversation and you don't feel like you're like, wow, that was a great conversation, and you're
Mhm.
thinking about the conversation that you had, and you're like, wow, I'm really looking forward to speaking to that person again.
Yes. And the benefit in doing that is when that person stays on your mind, then they can keep your best interests in mind as well. So it's not just building a business communication to get your questions answered, but how do I build a conversation so this person is in my network so I can watch out for people who would be good clients for them or be a good subject matter expert on X topic kind of thing. So a conversation benefits everyone.
So let's back up just for a second, just so anyone that's listening understands this is who you are, what your business is, how do you help?
Um, who I am is a trained journalist at heart. I have a love of language and learned very early in my career that the higher my position was in an organization working in corporate communications, the further I was getting away from being able to help my stakeholders and my clients understand each other better and solve their problems. Usually, the problems occur when I am taking notes on my computer and I'm reacting to what you said. I
Mm-hmm.
am not engaging with what you said. I'm not building a conversation, but I'm capturing information. So I am the journalist and I can apply that information.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as we've talked about, the only thing I know is what I knew to ask about. I cannot provide context. I don't know what are the motivations and what's the history behind anything you told me. So I could come up with a really surface level idea of what your business might be or your issue might be and not be able to solve your problem or make any progress for you.
Okay, well that makes sense, and I can relate to both sides. My stepmother was a professor of broadcast journalism in the School of Newhouse for Syracuse University. She was a news reporter. She was an anchor, and then up to that point where she became the professor of broadcast journalism, and I believe she even became the dean of Newhouse. So I got to see behind the scenes and what they're taught and how they do things. Um, and that's something that you get trained
Mhm.
in how to do things, how to ask questions, because an end result to it, right? You have to turn around and report on what you learned.
Right. So if you
But
don't ask the right questions, you're not going to get the information you need. And what you learn from your stepmother about asking questions is critical to any business leader to be able to ask questions that expands the conversation. I just gave you an answer, but if you were trying to sell me something and you wanted to come back to me later to say, you know, I know that our first connection might not have provided you with what you were looking for, but I wanted to pick up on something else that you said. And if you didn't ask questions that expanded the conversation, you wouldn't have those points to be able to follow up on again.
yeah, and I think that people are good conversationalists, understand this. When they ask a question, it doesn't come across as an interview. You're just inquisitive and you're actually really interested in the person that you're talking to. And if you
Mhm.
don't quite get it the first time, you keep asking until you get a better idea, until you have that. Oh, okay, now I understand, right? So
Yeah.
you're meaningfully you're having a meaningful connection, and the person doesn't feel um, awkward in that moment. Now you mentioned something last time, and I want to kind of get into this because I know that you said that you work or you enjoy working with middle managers.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a tough spot. And you said one thing specifically that I jotted down, even though I've got automated notes happening, I hand wrote it because it struck me. It was like a thing, and it said the middle managers are the head and heart of an organization, and they need to be able to translate up and down.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
talk to us about that because if someone is listening to this right now and they are either the CEO of a company and or they are the middle manager of the company, I think this is really, really important that they understand how someone in that position needs to understand how to actually have a conversation up and down.
Right. I believe that middle managers are the head and heart of the organization. The heart refers to how well they understand their team, can keep them engaged and motivated, and capture what really lights up their team members about their positions, okay, about their job. Then they have to be able to take that information usually provided by a Generation Z, a Gen Z person who is into purpose and feelings and I want to be heard, and providing you, the middle manager, with their report. You have to be able to create a conversation to also extract the information that senior manager is going to want to understand. Are we really being successful about the strategic execution? Or am I just getting a story here based on what somebody wants to tell me based on their impressions, kind of thing? And so middle managers acting as the connecting leaders have to be able to create a conversation that develops trust, that makes it possible for them to ask probing questions of their team members to understand the context of what they are sharing with the middle manager, then translate that into senior management or C-suite conversations, which are most often business communications because the executives want these answers to these questions to
Right.
make a critical decision. And so then you have to be able to know how far apart are the executives from the people executing the plan and bridge the gap in meaning, in examples, in I have to manage differently, I have to communicate differently, and use different language.
Yeah, from my experience, many of the middle managers are put in that position. They're giving a leadership title. And we joked about this last time, right? We said John Maxwell says that if you've got the title of a leader, but nobody's following you, then you're just going for a walk. And
Right.
I think a lot of middle managers have they have a lot of training that they really need to go through some interpersonal relationship type skills because the people that are under them, the people that are actually boots on the ground doing the work, when the middle manager says, we need to have a conversation, they're saying, I need to interrogate you.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that's how they feel. They feel
Right.
like they're going to be interrogated. So they're not excited about having a conversation. And it's certainly not a conversation where you feel open to express not only how you feel, but actually what's really going on. You're very guarded. So it's not a conversation. It's
That's right.
okay, it's an interrogation, and I'm walking on eggshells here.
Mhm, mhm. There's so much that you opened up in that comment, Bill. First of all, when you want to grow yourself as a professional, the most important conversation you have is one with yourself. So, what are your past stories about your performance? Who do you think you are? Do you have concern about being interrogated or being treated unfairly as you perceived it in a previous role? Well, then when you hear it's time to have a conversation, then it's going to be a CYA, being very guarded, measuring my words, and your middle manager is not going to get the information they need to help you or to be able to do their job and to communicate that effectively to the senior manager. Um, when you take your best performing individual contributors and make them middle managers, which is often what happens, the very first lesson middle managers need to understand is their entire vocabulary needs to shift from me, I did this, my role, my job, this is what I did for you, to we, and look at the team not just from individual relationships they have with every person on their team, but how they look at their team as a flywheel. How are all those pieces connected together? How do I make each one of them operate so that the whole equals more than the sum of its parts? And that's then helping your team members to communicate well also and to be comfortable with conversations.
And that middle manager, that person in that position, will do so much better if they take ultimate responsibility, right? So they hire the right people or they've got the right people on the team and they trust those people. They trust that those people are going to do their very best job. And that middle manager there is there to give them the support, the tools, and the resources in order to do their job really well. Um,
Yes,
but that middle manager also has a tough spot too, because ultimately that middle manager might also feel like, oh my goodness, I need to report to senior management and now I'm going to be interrogated.
exactly. And organizations need to understand even the high potential, high performing middle managers need some very basic skills in how to manage up, how to build and lead with influence, how communications is your number one leadership tool. Your ability to lead is judged by how well you communicate, how you handle those difficult conversations and differing perspectives, how you scale your team for growth without micromanaging them, and then how you lead change versus manage. You don't manage change, you lead it or you get out of the way.
So let me ask you this: if you were in the position where your job is to go in and speak with a company about making conversation a priority, I think one of the things that you probably run into a lot is, well, how do I communicate? Because a lot of people think because they're talking to each other that they're communicating and they're not. Just like in a relationship,
Yes.
between husband and wife, for example, someone might say, "I'm having a conversation with you," and then the other person might say, "Yes, but you're not hearing me."
Right, exactly. A lot of people who I have spoken with truly don't know where to begin the conversation and they really lose their words. And so what I tell them in that situation is act as the host. No matter what conversation you are in, act as the host of that conversation. What does a host do? Welcomes people, introduces them to other people in the room, points out where the refreshments are, where they can go outside, etc. There's nothing in that conversation that's about me and what I want to say, other
Mhm.
than to pay attention to the health and welfare and comfort of whom I'm speaking to. So start there. And then when you get past that point, it's always helpful to substantiate what you're talking about. When you bring in a fact you've read somewhere or, just a data point, it's kind of awkward because someone doesn't, you're speaking to doesn't have the context or who actually said that. It
Mhm.
reminds me of a phrase, why is that true? Because I said so. It's
Yes.
a lot of executives communicate that way. Why
Yes.
is that true? Because I'm the CEO and I said so. So if you provide context and justification, that helps people understand where you're coming from and builds a conversation.
Yeah, that's so true. And a lot of parenting is done that way also. It's because I said so.
Yes,
Why do I have to
yes,
do that? It's because I said so.
yes.
Right.
I do recall hearing that when I was a child.
So the interesting thing is everybody, when they're having a conversation, they have to understand where that person is coming from. Because if you're the CEO of a company, for example, and there are shareholders of a company, you are also responsible. And shareholders don't want to hear an excuse. You've either done the job or you haven't done the job. And if you haven't done the job, then you'll be replaced with somebody who will do the job. So
Yes.
that person has pressure, and then that pressure, they're basing everything based on numbers. And then that pressure then comes down to the middle manager who's in charge of getting everyone to produce and do the things that they need to do. So this becomes so important because if people don't really learn how to have real conversations, they're all hiding the truth from each other, and they're not really finding the solutions on what they need to do to get the outcome that they're looking for in the first place. So it's counterproductive. Um,
Hmm.
so what would you do? So if if you were to go into a company, or what have you done in the past when you go to a company? What's the first step? Like, well, what's the conversation that you have, or what's the conversation you'd want to have with a CEO or a middle manager to kick things off? What kind of things would you want to know?
What would I want to know? I would want to know the motivation for why they brought me into the conversation, the ask, people, especially when people are hiring, in the hiring mode, they ask for what they want. They don't ask for what they need.
Love that.
And it is your job as a new employee or a expert coming in to then, in the first few exchanges, to understand, okay, I understand what you asked for. Now, what do you need? Oftentimes, they don't know what they need. And so then the diagnostic process goes from there.
Yeah, I love that. And would you agree with this? Even the initial answer that they give you may still be very surface level.
Totally. Totally. And think about the miscommunication that happens with all the people we're talking to, all the information we are exposed to, all of the translation we have to do. And so, if you are just sharing that information in a transactional basis, what are the chances that people are going to remember it and people are going to understand it as you intend? So, slowing conversation down, asking conversations while you are running asking questions while you are running the conversation to make sure your audience understands what you just said. That is critical to making sure that you are being understood. So you are a CEO, you've provided all this information, and then you say, so what is your takeaway from this conversation? What are the points that stick with you, and what do you think your approach is going to be? You need some time to think about it? Great. Let's put 2 minutes on the calendar, 30 minutes on the calendar, whatever, to check in. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay?
Yeah, I love that because you're keeping that conversation alive and
Yes.
going, and you're
Yes.
making them take the time from your conversation to actually think about what they want. Uh,
Yes.
and I love that. And I think the other part of that is when it comes down to it, if some things aren't going well, they may say, well, the numbers are down. Okay. But what is that doing to you? How does that make you feel? What emotions are coming up? Are you getting angry? Are you getting frustrated? Are you getting anxious to the point where you can't think, how can I support you right now because of what what's happening and what it's doing to you emotionally, mentally, physically? There's a
Yes.
lot more to it.
Yes. Yes. And reacting to the results doesn't even begin to uncover what the solution needs to be. And a lot of times people don't recognize that things aren't working well until it's too late and all they can do is react to the results, layoffs, budget cuts, etc. So recognizing when conversations and communications go off track earlier in the process, you will have more options to work with and more time to course correct. And communications with good conversations minimizes the number of times you have to have pointless communications.
Yes,
We have multiple channels to communicate in these days, and we've never been worse at communicating.
yes. So as we kind of wrap up here, let me ask you this, and I'll just give you a little bit of praise around this. You are very easy to talk to, very easy to communicate with. So that being said, if I'm the CEO, sometimes that's what the CEO needs. They just need someone who's just a really great communicator that's easy to talk with, that they can just have an honest conversation. So if someone wanted to have a conversation with you, they either listened to the podcast or they read the article and they said, you know what, I really could just use an ear. I need somebody that I can just kind of put it all out there, and they're not going to, they're just going to be easy to, it's just, I can just let it out and listen, but somebody who's going to be empathetic, not just sympathetic, to help me sort this out. How would somebody reach out to you? Like, what was the best way for them to communicate or to reach out with you?
Yep. Email, LinkedIn, whatever works for you. I have done a lot of that type of listening and having conversations with executives way before I had the position that would qualify me for that. And it's very important for CEOs, which is the loneliest place in the
Yes,
world, to be able to process their own thinking because they can't trust people inside the organization or
yes.
feel it would impact their communications with them, etc. So having a trusted confidant who can listen and say, here's what I heard. I've heard about this elsewhere. Have you considered this? Absolutely critical for a CEO to keep track of everything that they're thinking about and working on at any given time.
Well, I'm going to encourage that, and I'm going to include your contact information in the
Absolutely.
podcast notes, and then also in the at the end of the article. So someone who would like to reach out to you is going to be able to do that. So, Sayre, absolutely a pleasure to speak with you today, and I thank you so much for being part of the show.
Likewise, Bill, I really enjoyed it. And anytime you want to have a conversation, let me know.
Yes, ma'am.